Chapter Talk for Week 3. 3 key learning objectives we are going to tackle. Number 1, realize the importance of informative speaking. We're going to clarify what it is and what it isn't. Secondly, then, identify techniques to help the listener learn and, of course, remember your message. And then thirdly, design and prepare an informative speech. So that is going to be your task beyond the learning this week. So let's hit our first objective. Realize the importance of informative speaking. So let's just take a moment to step to the side and clarify. The true value of informative speaking is to enlighten, to help listeners learn, to help them grow, to help expand their mind. The purpose of informative speaking is not to convince, it is not to persuade, it is to simply enlighten. Our education system is largely built around informative speaking. You are learning, growing, and expanding your mind class by class by class. And then the second value is to reduce ignorance. Oftentimes there are misperceptions, misconceptions of a topic, and it's not out of malice, it's simply out of lack of information. So informative speaking does these two things. It enlightens and it reduces ignorance. So let's take that now to your informative speech. You will be assigned an informative speech next week. So think about, as we discussed last week, what are you good at? Where do your talents lie? Where do you have experience? Where do you have levels of expertise? Okay, those are the topics that typically will do justice to your informative speech. Now let's overlay that with how important it is. So we need to think about, okay, is my topic significant enough to merit an informative speech? Meaning, does it do justice to informative speaking? Secondly, how much do listeners know about this topic? Is there really room for enlightenment? Is there a need to reduce misconceptions about this topic? Thirdly, what do they need to know? What is your primary purpose? What do you want to inform your listener of? And then lastly, do I understand enough to teach others? It is, if you are looking for an informative speech, this is not the time to go seek a hobby and talk about. We want to dip into the bucket of our existing knowledge, talents, and experiences. Okay, so let's think about the value of informative speaking and then cross over and think about what could I bring to an informative speaking topic. Our second objective then, identify techniques to help listeners learn and remember. So we're going to go through really speaking techniques. There are a handful of them in front of you on the screen here, and let's just break this down. How do we use our words to help our listeners, number one, learn? Because that is the primary purpose of informative speaking. We want our listeners to walk away knowing something, to have gained knowledge, to have reduced ignorance, okay? So that's our goal. So here are some techniques that we can use to help listeners learn more effectively and, most importantly, remember. Walk away with more than they knew on the topic before they took in your speech. So let's run through these. First technique is relevance. Be certain that your topic relates to an audience. So for example, if I am going to go into a high school and teach, a more appropriate topic would be choosing a college, how to apply for scholarship money, versus choosing a doctoral program, how to obtain a master's degree. Obviously, topics surrounding the next step beyond high school have far more relevance to a high school audience. Okay, so make sure that your topic is relevant to those listening. Second then is intensity. How do you use your words to make your information stand out? How do we make it strike? How do we deliver it where it has emphasis? Boldness in the energy and the enunciation you put in. Selecting colorful words that illustrate your point. And then, of course, passion. And that comes from you. That is that energy you exert. So specifically, let's talk about some language techniques under the bubble of intensity. The first is using metaphors. Metaphors, as you know, are figures of speech. They are words or phrases that represent an applied action or object. Metaphors are powerful. The second type of technique under language is alliteration. That is when you use the same letter or sound at the beginning of words, okay? So you repeat that same letter sound. So the textbook example given is ticking time bomb, ticking time bomb. That is an example of an alliteration because we are repeating that T sound. I do trainings for local companies, and I have a series of trainings that I have used alliteration to name them. I have a workshop called Write Like a Leader, Listen Like a Leader, Love Like a Leader. I am using alliteration to create intensity in my language. The next and final technique under intensity is an automatopoeia. I repeat, an automatopoeia. And those are words that sound like what they signify, okay? So a clock going tick, 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 tick. That ticking is both the action and the sound. A dog barking, an alarm buzzing, a bird cackling or chirping. The word represents the action or what it signifies. So by using automatopoeias, alliterations, and metaphors, we can create color and enhance intensity in our language. Moving around the circle here, next is contrast. Just like when you are reading, you see bold font, you see italicized language, we want to create that same bold font with our words, non-verbally, with your voice. So slowing down the pace and then speeding up the pace, bringing your voice down in volume and then increasing it to build intensity. Pace, volume, pause, all of those things help keep the audience engaged, but it also punctuates. It adds that emphasis where you want and need it. And then under contrast, we also have repetition. Next to contrast, repetition. As we talked last week, when you begin your speech, you share your purpose statement and you preview your main points. As you move through the body of the speech, you are transitioning, cueing the audience from point to point to point. And then in the conclusion, you repeat your purpose and you review your main points. That is a simple technique of repetition, okay? Repetition is the mother of success. Which has been said by many successful people. So repeat what you want the audience to remember. Be sure to repeat your purpose statement. Be sure to repeat your main points in the intro, body, and conclusion. Okay, and then the second part of objective 2 is continuing the idea of how do we help listeners learn and most importantly, remember. So let's tackle this. Before you, you see 3 bubbles. These are 3 central concepts to help you remember what the audience remembers. Remember what the audience remembers. The first concept is the WIFM. I did sales training for years, and we always guided to this acronym, WIFM, what's in it for me? That is the central concern of your listener. What do I stand to gain? What will I learn? How will I be better because of this information? You want to think about that as you're selecting a topic and as you're speaking. Think about the interests, the desires, and the motivation of your listener, because ultimately that's what's going to engage them and keep them with you throughout the speech if they feel they stand to learn or gain something from your message. The second concept is the coat rack theory. The coat rack theory says, in order for people to remember, we want to tap into long-term memory storage. And the idea is we hang new information on old. Just as a coat rack has hooks and you hang your coat on that, you want to first tap into the existing hook and then layer new information on. So when I teach face-to-face in class, I always start the day with a review of what we covered the class meeting prior. What I'm doing there is repetition, repeating what we learned the day before, but that's also the attempt to move that in the long-term memory store. So as we continue to learn and apply information, we can hang the new information on the existing, okay? And then the third and final item that truly helps listeners remember is simply organization. A well-organized speech is loaded with repetition. It is loaded with reiteration, stating your purpose, previewing your main points in the intro, cueing your listener with transitions as you move through the body, repeating your purpose statement in the conclusion, as well as reviewing your main points. These things deliver a coherent message, and they put your listener at ease because there's a pace. They know where you are going with it and where you are tracking. Okay? And our third and final objective then is to design and prepare an informative speech. So I'm going to help you tackle the design piece, but the preparation is on you. You will be assigned an outline this week. Okay? That means by the end of this week, you will submit to me your rough draft of your informative speaking outline. What you see before you are 6 different designs in which you can choose. Now, I don't want us to get overwhelmed by this. When in doubt, go categorical. But I'm going to give you some other options if you feel it would best serve your message. So first, let's talk categorical. That is where you arrange your 3 main points and how they make sense. So 3 reasons to own a pet. And those 3 main points might be physical health, mental health, and social wellness. So I have designed the speech according to 3 reasons to own a pet. Second option then is comparative. What is the same and what is different? The then and now. Okay, so I've had students talk about diets. For example, keto. My life before the keto diet and my life after. They are comparing before and after and supporting bullet 1 before, during, after to show us how life became better because of the diet they applied. There's both a literal analogy as well as a figurative analogy you can use when comparing, okay? So literal would be the same field of experience. So for example, maybe you're a foodie and you are going to compare American cuisine versus Japanese cuisine. And your main points may be soup, meat, beverages. So you're literally within that same area of discussion, American cuisine versus Japanese cuisine. Figuratively then is from different fields of experience. So you're taking 2 very obscure things and comparing them, okay? Now, I have used this specifically to teach about autism and the sensory overload that takes place in students with autism. And I have compared the sensory processing system of a high-functioning autist to that of being stuck at a Motley Crue concert, okay? It's a figurative analogy, but what it's saying is that sensory overload that you would have at a Motley Crue concert is the same as a high-functioning autist experience sitting in a relatively quiet classroom. That's a figurative analogy, taking 2 very obscure things and comparing them for emphasis. The third item then is spatial or spatial, however you pronounce it. This is where you simply arrange the main points and how they occur. Okay, so in the past I've done admissions training, and we would train specifically on how to tour prospective students, and we would arrange the tour into the chronological order. So you'd begin in the admissions building, speak to that point, you'd move to the dorm rooms, speak to that point, and then third stop, rec center. So we had a spatial design where the speech and the information paired with where we were physically. The fourth option then is sequential. Now this is what you'll use when you deliver your demonstration speech. That is where you break things down into step 1, step 2, step 3. Next is chronological, and that is where you would go through a period of history and you take us through the events before, during, and after 9/11, or the day Kennedy was shot, morning, noon, and night. And then lastly, we have causation, and that's where you examine cause and effect, okay? What causes and what the effect is. So we just covered 3 objectives: realizing the importance of informative speaking, identifying techniques to help listeners learn and remember, and the last objective is yours: to design and prepare an informative speech. Thank you.